Hi guys, Joe here, and welcome to 750 Gaming. This video is part 1 of a 3-part series looking at the recent released Boarding Patrol boxes from Games Workshop, and how I think we can make them better. Okay, so Games Workshop announced these Boarding Patrol boxes to complement their Boarding Actions rule set as part of the Arcs of Omen narrative and the 9th edition endgame. And it looks like this format of gaming is going to be rewritten and continue into 10th edition as an in-between for Kill Team and the new 40k proper. Now that they've all been announced and are being rolled out, let's look at these Boarding Patrol boxes a little bit more. See what models are inside, look at their points value as per the current 40k balanced data slates, and think about their value as an army foundation or add-on. This will be a 3-part series where I've grouped everything according to faction allegiance. So colloquially I've titled these groupings Imperium, Not Imperium, and Very Not Imperium. That's to say, those loyal to the God Emperor of Mankind, those heretics who are not, and then the patrols of the Xenos factions. We'll initially be looking at the units in these boxes with their base loadout without any war gear and as their cheapest unit type should you be able to model the models as different things. We can then run some interesting baseline comparisons as to points per model, cost per point, what you'd save if you bought everything separately, all of that. We can then do some assumptions on realistic loadouts and points for these boxes, and then what I think you'd need to do to make them a viable playable army. For instance, some of these boxes don't even have a HQ unit choice included, which is very peculiar, but there you go. I don't know what 10th edition detachments will look like. Likely a development on the Arcs of Omen detachment, and certainly a move away from the tried and tested patrol detachment that I enjoy as a foundational framework, and all the others, etc. So, for the sake of sanity and sort of future-proofing, let's just say that a viable playable army at 750 points in this case has at least 1 HQ and 1 troop. The rest can be whatever the hell you like, or whatever's in the box that wouldn't fit otherwise. Then they'll be playable now with a bit of grace, and we can see what they look like in 6 months' time come 10th edition. So essentially this is my completely arbitrary guide to what to buy if you want to try and build a bigger army on the cheap. So thinking on brand, I'll be basing all of this on what I think could be useful for a 750 point army. So let's get to it. In this part we're looking at the Imperium, and currently we have 5 boarding patrols to choose from. First up, so we can get them out of the way, we have your standard Space Marines, modelled as ever by the Games Workshop poster boys in blue. Yay! In this box you get 16 Primaris scale miniatures. So that's a Gravis captain, a squad of 5 intercessors, and a squad of 10 assault intercessors, or 2 squads of 5 if you desire. At base loadout it's 445 points, which isn't bad. The box originally retailed at £65, which is a saving of £37.50 from the £102.50 you would have to spend to buy the unit separately, so it's a solid if not spectacular start at 28 points per model. Realistically there's not too much you could do with this lot to bloat your points. I mean, if you went with 2 squads of assault boys and war geared up both sergeants, you could be looking at an extra 10 points each. 25 if you really wanted to give them Thunderhammers, and the heavy intercessors could of course take a heavy bolter for plus 10. El Capitan Gravissimo is as he is, so 475 points is likely what you'll be getting out of this box as max. But if you took it all at face value, then this one is a relatively simple upscale to get to 750 points. A 95 point Primaris Librarian, a 135 point Outrider squad, and a 75 point Eliminator squad could be pretty handy and sensible additions. The heavies and the limbs will give you a decent gun line. The assault intercessors will give you flex on the move with a melee focus, while the Outriders can run some decent turn 1 interference with the bonus of shooting and slashing, and the captain does what a captain does, and of course the librarian will bring you that psychic flavour to the party. Money wise, for those units, it'll be around £95 at Games Workshop RRP, so £160 in total. And if you can go to a third party reseller and get 20% off of that, then I think it's decent. Certainly if you wanted to go generic Space Marines, it's not the worst place to start. But what if you wanted some specific Space Marines with a witchy flavour? Well, let's look at the Grey Knights box set then. Here it's £70 for the same 16 miniatures, but these guys are a little different. Your HQ out of the box is the character Castellan Crow for 90 points. You get 5 Grey Knight Terminators at 200 points and 10 Grey Knight Space Marines at 220 points, giving you 510 at base loadout from this boarding patrol. You're saving £32.50 here on the RRP of £102.50 for the lot if bought separately. Now, the caveat of note here is that these guys are all firstborn skulls. None of these chaps have crossed the Rubicon, and if I'm honest, with the advent of 10th edition and those Primara scale Terminators, I feel this box has the capacity to age a bit like a banana. I think it'll be for some people. Of course, it'll be full of nostalgia vibes after all. It's just not necessarily for me. But with all that in mind, what would I do to boost this up to 750 points if I bought it? Well, actually, with all of that in mind, not all that much. I'd actually only purchase one more item, and that would be an old school box Dreadnought. I would load it out simply with a plasma cannon and close combat weapon for the baseline 130 points, because, you know, if I preferred to or want to do something different in the future, I could always proxy in a Redemptor. If I had one kicking around, proxy in the Redemptor and use the same loadout quite happily. Your Grey Knight Terminators count as troops, so I'd then take 9 of the regular Grey Knights and list them as the fast attack unit interceptors rather than a strike squad, which is essentially just a way of giving that strike team personal teleporters, using them as a 9-man assault squad with force weapons, storm bolters and psychic abilities. Lovely stuff. I'd then take that last Grey Knight model, probably a Sergeant type sculpt or Sergeant head swap, something like that, something characterful, and list him then as a Brotherhood champion for 70 points. That'll give you 724, so 26 in the bag for whatever relics or gifts you want to give your champ or any other war gear you might want to splash about. So it's only about £105 spend in total, and less if you go to the third party retailers or second hand store for a boxy dread if you wish, and you'll end up with 44 points a model. Worth a thought, maybe. Sticking with the Inquisition, let's look at the newly announced Sisters of Battle, or Adeptus Sororitas, if you will. In the box you get quite a bit of plastic, actually. A Canoness, 5 Celestian Sacrosancts, 9 Sisters Repentia with a Repentia Superior, and 10 Battle Sisters with Cherub. That's 27 miniatures there, at a baseline of 416 points. Now, we don't actually know how much this box will cost at the time of writing and recording this script, but the max cost for these boxes so far is 85. For all the models separately here, it would be 135, so if we called it 80 to 85 with a 50 to 55 pound saving and all of that, that sounds about right and pretty good value. At around 15 points per model though, it is going to be on the lower side, so we have a fair bit to do to get that up. Like I said, I think you've actually got quite a decent array of Sisters of Battle units with this box, and so the only issue is their relative underpoweredness. You've got a couple of options. You either hoard it out and splash your cash on a load more squads of cannon fodder, or we do a bit more targeted spending on just a few things that could then stick around a bit on the table, maybe camp on an objective or draw some fire away from your Sisters on foot, and also still play with the Sisters of Battle fluff. So I'd go for a squad of Paragon Warsuits to bulk out 210 points. And then, in for a penny, let's go full iconic Sisters of Battle and go get a 50 quid on-brand immolator. At the very least, it will give you transport into the fray for your Sacrosancts and Canoness, but I think it is an iconic Sisters of Battle unit. And despite its price, I think sitting there in the middle of the table in all its glory, it makes a great addition to a Sisters of Battle army. It'd be 736 points in total then, with 14 to spend on some war gear somewhere, so maybe a pistol or weapon upgrade for a Sister Superior, or a Hunter-Killer missile launcher, if you're that way inclined. Of course, it ain't cheap to do all this, but then that's gonna kind of come with the territory for the less elite factions. Having said that, if the Boarding Patrol comes out at 80 quid and we can get 20% off of everything at a third party retailer, then maybe, just maybe, we could get all the plastic here for around 140 quid. Which, if we considered it, would actually be 135 for just all the contents of the Boarding Patrol box if we bought it all separately anyway. That doesn't actually feel all that bad. Plus, at 31 minis now, we've pushed that points per model up to 25. The Adeptus Mechanicus, however, are another beast altogether. Similar to the Sisters, it's a less elite faction, and as such, their power on the tabletop is to do with strength in numbers, so to speak. The Boarding Patrol box is a Tech Priest Dominus, 3 Cataphrom Destroyers, 5 Sicarian Infiltrators or Rust Stalkers, and 10 Skitari Vanguard or Rangers. It's 19 miniatures for the rather weak 380 points at around 20 points per model. But for an 85 quid box, I just don't think you get an awful lot for your money here. And what's more, you'll need to spend a lot more again to make a decent fist of it on the battlefield. Sure, it's a £45 saving on the $135 you'd have to pay for all of it separately, but I reckon they could have squeezed something else into the box as well. Anyway, getting 380 points to 750 is a bit of a task. Now, the biggest bit of bloat you could do would just be to throw Belisarius Call into the fray. 180 points to 3750 is average. Here's what he is on the field, but it's actually a very nice model in my opinion, so I'd have no problem fielding it, but it would still leave you nigh on 200 points to bloat out, which, if we're honest, is going to be 2 more unit boxes. The cheapest would be some more Skitari at around 3250 for the box and another 90.10 model squad, or you could pay 35 for another 5-man Sicarian blob. I think you might want a fast attack choice though, so I would probably look at spending 3750 at least for a box of 5 Taraxi. It's on the cards, but either way, to get the AdMec up to 750 points, it's going to be around £100 in addition to the 85 you're paying for the box set. If you particularly like the AdMec, then sure, go for it. But if this is your first foray into 40k, then I'd probably avoid these guys to begin with. However, if you wanted to just play this game for sort of cheap, and you really didn't want to spend too much time on the modelling and painting side of the hobby, what's the bare minimum you could play with? Well, enter the Adeptus Custodes stage right. In the Custodies Boarding Patrol, you get Trajan Valaris himself, 3 Alaris Custodians, and 5 Custodian Guard. That's 605 base for just the 9 miniatures, which is a whopping great 67 points per model. So here you've got a couple of choices. If you model and list your standard Custodian Guard, if that's really a thing, with Sentinel blades and shields, then actually, in all honesty, you don't need to buy anything else. Bash up one of your Alaris Custodians as a shield captain commander, and another as a Vexilla Praetor, popping the last one onto the sidelines, you will end up with a staggering 83 points per model. Alternatively, buy a box of 3 Alaris Custodies for £35, and add 2 of them to your Alaris Custodian ranks for a flat 750 points, with 11 models at 68 points per model. Or, if you fancied bringing a bit more fluff and fodder to the army, then a squad of 5 Sisters of Silence, either as prosecutors or vigilators, will set you back the same price. And then you could make one of the Alaris Custodies a Vexilla Praetor and keep the other 2 as Custodians, etc. And you'd still be in the same sort of ballpark. Now, we don't know how much this box will cost yet, but it's £100 for all the units separately. So you're probably looking at around 70 to 75 for the Boarding Patrol to save around 25 to 30. But regardless of how you want to do your Custodies and how many minis you fancy painting, if you went to a third-party retailer and looked to get 15 to 20% off this, then this is a great way to get a 750 point army for less than £100. And even if you wanted to push that to 1,000 points, maybe get some Virtus Praetors on jet bikes, that would be the way to go for just another 35 odd quid, or whatever. This is definitely one I'll be getting, and to be honest, I'll probably be going down the route of getting some Sisters of Silence to tack on as another unit, just to give me a bit more tactical flex on the tabletop. So how would I rate these? Well, I've got 2 sort of scales to go by, just to overthink and overcomplicate it, obviously. I've got a 750 scale, which is based on points per model, and then I've got a money scale based on value for money and how much it would cost to bump it all up to said 750 points. So 750 wise, it looks like this. At the top we have the Space Marines. Boo, boring. But once you've added your units to bulk it up, their points per model is bang on the sweet spot of 23 minis at 33 points per mini. In second place are the Grey Knights. Shock horror, more Space Marines. A little bit more powerful, but still decent with the 17 minis at 44 points per mini. Next are the AdMec, with 30 minis giving a 25 points per mini, which is right on the lower boundary of my happy range, shall we say. At 31 minis and 24 ppm, the Adeptus Sororitas pit the Custodies for 4th spot with their verging on Horde army. And then in final place with 58 ppm are the Adeptus Custodies. I've based that on me spending money for some Sisters of Silence to bulk out the numbers to 13 minis. Because if we just went with the 750 config for the 9 in the box at 83 points per model, then I think you're just asking for trouble on the tabletop. It's just going to be a little bit too swingy towards the negative for my liking. Money-wise, however, the Custodies are going to be right at the top, along with the Grey Knights with an estimated total expenditure of around £105 to make a viable army. I'm going to put the Custodies right at the top, however, for the sake that actually, if all you wanted to spend is however much the Boarding Patrol box set comes out and retails at, then theoretically, that's all you have to spend. Next are the generic Space Marines, with a total of 160 quid's worth of expected expenditure, and the Adeptus Sororitas come in 4th at 175, and then finally at the bottom come the AdMec, with an expended outlay of nigh on £200. So what would I spend my money on? Well, I don't have any Custodies, so for a quick one-click shop 750 point army to add to my ranks, that's probably what I would do. There is your value for money, even with an extra squad. I'd still like another unit or a few more minis on the tabletop personally, which is why they're at the bottom of the 750 scale, but you can't really argue with it. Now, if I didn't already have 4 750 Space Marine armies, I'd be very tempted to go down the route I mentioned for those guys. But I do, so I won't. Which means that next on my list would probably be the Adeptus Sororitas. If there wasn't such a high money tax on those Paragon warsuits or the Immolator, then they would probably be my first pick above the Custodies. Like I said, I think you actually get a lot of characterful plastic in the Boarding Patrol box. So fingers crossed it comes out at a decent price. Personally, I'm not bothered about the Grey Knights, gotta be honest. I'm a sucker for Primaris Space Marines. The Firstborns just don't do it for me anymore. Once upon a time, in the halcyon days of 3rd edition, sure, but not these days, I'm afraid. Though again, you can't argue with the numbers. It's a solid choice if you are down with that Firstborn vibe. And then, yeah, AdMec. Well, the less we say about that, the better, I think. But those are just my opinions on these Imperium boarding patrols, and we've got a load more to review and think about over the next few videos. As ever, let me know what you think, if you agree or disagree or whatever, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Let's go!
As always, I just do this for fun and make these videos when I can. I don't have a regular release schedule, they just happen when they happen. So, if you want to make sure you don't miss a beat over the next few months and going forward, then hit subscribe so you can catch these when they come. If you enjoyed this or any of my other videos, then do hit that like button as it really helps boost my ego, and do come check me out on Instagram for all my hobbying updates. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.